On this edition of the NESN Red Sox podcast, we look back on the Red Sox series against the Yankees and give our biggest takeaways from an eventful weekend in the Bronx.
And we'll look ahead to a big series with the Washington Nationals and compare two of the game's best players, Mookie and Bryce Harper.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the NESN Red Sox podcast. I'm Ricky Doyle, joined as always by Dakota Randall. Dakota, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Let's go. I'm doing well. Had ourselves I'd say an eventful weekend for the Red Sox. A little trip to the Bronx.
Yep.
Dropping 2 of 3 in each of the games were kind of fascinating in their own ways. It was a roller coaster of a weekend, that's for sure.
I'd say the series as a whole was entirely disappointing, regardless of which side you fall on.
I agree. I would agree with you on that.
You know, pretty uninteresting.
A lot to get into though, because a lot happened over the course of. I mean, it wasn't really a competitive series. You know what I mean? Like the games kind of stunk, but a lot of things to take from it. So I guess we'll start off generally. What kind of the biggest takeaways? We'll do our one good thing, one bad thing. I think that seems to work out pretty well. We're hitting our stride with that, I think.
Yeah.
So if you look at this from a Red Sox perspective, like I said, again, dropping 2 out of 3 in the Bronx. Now the Yankees slightly ahead. I mean, we're really dealing with percentage points and whatnot in the standings. But from a Red Sox perspective, what's a good thing? Would you say? All right, let me ask you this before we get into that. Would you?
No, go.
How would you describe this weekend in general? A disappointing weekend for the Red Sox. Obviously dropping 2 of 3, but just the manner in which it happened as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked before the series last week during the podcast that we were looking for the Red Sox to finally make a statement, and I mean, I guess you could say they kind of did against the Angels in sweeping them, but I think the Angels have proven to be as irrelevant as they have been for the past decade or so. So really, it was upon the Red Sox to go in and win 2 out of 3 in New York. Prove that you can go in, face a good team on the road and win a series. They split in Houston, they split in Seattle, and now they've dropped 2 out of 3 in both their series in New York. So we've yet to see them go into what we could call, a good team's ballpark and prove that they're the better team. And aside from the game where Sonny Gray, threw up all over himself, which was rather predictable. I don't think it was a very good weekend for the Red Sox. But if I'm going to take one good thing, I would say,
especially too, just to hop on your other point though, that going in off the sweep of the Angels, they were riding high going into that series. Did exactly what we joked last week about the clowns that the Angels were rolling out there on the mound, but
John Moore, or what? Not John Moore.
Whatever the hell his name is. He looked like Sunshine from Remember the Titans.
Yeah, a lot worse.
And they kicked the crap out of him, and then whoever else was trotted out there over the course of that 3-game stretch. But they were riding high, but it came to a screeching halt really in that the first game. And then there was the peaks and valleys, because the second game, as you got into about Sonny Gray puking all over his shoes, they kind of had a different feel to them. It almost seemed like, I think a lot of that stems from Chris Sale being on the mound. I mean, they kind of had a different attitude that night, it seemed like. Right.
Well, and I think what the series really showed us, and we already know this, but the importance of starting pitching in these games against good teams, and that's been the Red Sox problem in the playoffs the last couple of years, is their starting pitching puts them in a hole. And it's tough to come back from that. And, we saw in Game 1, Eduardo Rodriguez put the Red Sox in a hole, and, they couldn't climb out of it. Game 2, Sonny Gray put the Yankees in a hole, and then obviously Game 3, David Price was terrible and put the Red Sox in a deep hole. But to go back to, trying to think of one good thing. For me.
Before I rudely interrupted you.
Right. I would say, for me, it's Rafael Devers. Obviously he's kind of had a strange season. He got out to kind of a rough start. He struggled mightily in the first couple months of the season, and we've seen him turn it on as of late. And in Saturday night's win, he went 5 for 5 with a grand slam. And I think he's still young, and he's going to have his struggles, and he's going to have moments where he gets hot. But I think one thing we can say about him is that the moment doesn't seem too big for him, which is impressive, obviously, in a 21-year-old. And to be able to go in there in Yankee Stadium and hit a grand slam in the first inning, and just the way he's been swinging at the plate. And we talked a couple weeks ago where I wanted to see Devers start hitting the ball the other way more, because that's what made him so productive as a rookie last season, and that grand slam went the other way. So just to see him kind of come out of his slump, I think his average, at least before last night's game, was up over 250, 14 homers. And if he continues on this pace, his average might only really be around 250 to 270, but he's on pace for around 27 homers, 90 to 100 RBI, and from a 21-year-old third baseman, you can't really complain about that.
Yeah, you live with the kind of the ebbs and flows. Like there's going to be the struggles, which is now kind of we're getting to that point where it's that crucial period for him where you have a guy come up, he enjoys that initial success, then pitchers start adapting to him. You're going to see the valleys come into play,
right.
And now it's a matter of then bouncing back and reacting to the pitchers reacting essentially.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the point we're getting to with him. And like you said, that is pretty encouraging. The fact that you're right, the moment doesn't seem too big for him. He's had these big hits at Yankee Stadium. Obviously, even going back to last year, the home run off Chapman.
And listen, his defense is still not good. Like he's still kind of a butcher over there.
Right.
But I think over the last month or so, we've definitely seen some strides, as small as they may be, where he's not butchering throws as much. He's still the one that he's still coughing up balls, and when there's an even just slightly bad hop, it kind of eats him up. But I think we've seen enough. He's progressed defensively enough where I can see where he might become at least an adequate defensive third baseman. However, the acquisition of Brandon Phillips, and they said he's playing third base in Pawtucket, you have to wonder, if Devers keeps hitting, I don't think there's any way they take him out of the lineup. But you just have to wonder, where does Brandon Phillips play into this? Or are the Red Sox so confident in Devers defensively at third base that they're afraid to go to him in the playoffs? Because you can't have those kind of plays happen.
Yeah, see, the Phillips acquisition, which is kind of interesting. You almost forget about it so far, but I view that more as to kind of safeguard against the Dustin Pedroia injury.
But I thought so too. But they said he's playing third base.
Yeah, no, I know that's what's been said. But
even if he doesn't end up coming up playing third base, clearly just by doing that, they're showing that they want an extra body at third base. And to me, the only reason can be because you're concerned about Devers' defense, and he was struggling a little bit at the plate. But I think you get in a playoff series, you can't have a guy butchering routine plays.
True.
So that's why I'm happy to see him kind of improving here over the last few weeks.
Although I would say I don't know how much of an upgrade Brandon Phillips is going to be at third base.
I don't either. I mean, he hasn't played
he clearly dropped off defensively last year, and obviously the majority of his experience is at second base. So I don't know. I don't know how much third base he's going to be playing, or if that really did play a factor into them going out and getting him. But it's kind of one of those sneaky, interesting pickups.
Right.
But what about you? We should probably just real quick. What do you think of Steve Pearce signing trade?
I don't know. I kind of.
But it's kind of what we talked about last week with the Mark Canha,
right?
The rumor that I understand the theory behind it. I don't think it's ultimately gonna make or break this season for him.
I also like it.
But I understand it.
I like it because it's an acquisition of a guy who, me and you both love to throw around random players' names from our youth. And Steve Pearce totally feels like a guy that 25 years from now, you're going to name drop him at a party 100%. With Red Sox fans, and everyone's going to laugh,
Yeah.
But, excuse me, this is a guy that's, he's no stranger to the AL East. He's now played for every team in the division. And, I think he's going to see a lot of at-bats against left-handers. Mitch Moreland's obviously had a great season, but if he has one weakness, it's against left-handed pitchers. And Steve Pearce, he's proven he can be a good hitter on the big league level. And, you can never have too many productive bats.
Useful
especially
player.
From the right side. They need more right-handed hitting, and outside of Betts and Martinez. So I like it. I know they gave up a prospect, but, I think it's good. Get some power at the corner and field spots.
I agree. So, all right, I'm going to go with my one good thing here. And I'm going to go back to just Chris Sale. I mean, we kind of – last week was really the first time that we had talked about him in a long time because, like we said, it almost gets to the point where you take it for granted a little bit how good he is and how much he stabilizes that rotation. But, I mean, that game on Saturday, they needed that. And he came out and he was just nails. Being named American League Pitcher of the Month today. So
right.
He's just in one of those stretches where he's locked in. And – we touched on it last week about, them managing his workload, making sure the pitch. We saw that again Saturday night. I mean, that game was out of reach. Get him out of there. So, I mean, it just seems like he's in as good of a place as he's been since coming to the Red Sox. And even though, like, the buzz isn't quite what it was last year because, like I said, we take it for granted, but he's in a good place, and I feel a lot better about his chances of keeping it up and sustaining it throughout the year rather than having that drop-off that he had last year.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out because I think if you look at the numbers, he's really only on pace to throw something between 25 and 30 fewer innings than last season.
Right.
And, that sounds like a lot, but, in reality, does that really make the difference for a guy, 20, 30 innings total? We'll see. It might. I'm not saying it won't.
That could be 4 playoff starts right there.
I think it's more about, legitimate rest and finding good spots for it. I mean, so for me, it's interesting to see coming up in the All-Star break, they have an opportunity where if they start Sale on the final day before the All-Star break, and the final game, I think it's in Baltimore, and then hopefully he doesn't get into the All-Star game, and then it used to be that teams would come out of the All-Star break and throw their ace out there, kind of get the ball rolling, but they could take a different approach and have Sale pitch in the 5th spot coming out of the All-Star break, and then you would give him, I think it's 13 days off, which is they used to do it with John Lester.
Right.
It's a really good, almost 2-week break in the middle of the season, and that's the stuff for me that can make a big difference. It's not pulling a guy out an inning here and there. It's I think it's the grind of a baseball season that gets to some guys, and for a guy like Sale, maybe getting these breathers to catch his breath and really rev up for the stretch run is what he needs. So I like to see them do that, and it'll be interesting to see if they kind of find another way to give him extra rest. But with the division being so close it is, I don't know if they really can afford to do that.
Right.
So.
Pitching well against the Yankees, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been just lights out against them. I mean, he's been lights out against the majority of Major League Baseball, but when you look at the stark contrast between, I guess I'll just kind of funnel this into my bad thing, the stark contrast between Chris Sale's performance against the Yankees matched up against David Price's performance against the Yankees since coming to the Red Sox, which has been, by every measure, has just been really disastrous, especially at Yankee Stadium. Now 0-5 with a 10.44 ERA and 5 starts with the Red Sox at Yankee Stadium.
Right. On the same, and meanwhile, yesterday John Lester hit a 3-run home run at the plate.
It just, the optics was just not good. And I want to link this together too. If you're looking at these two rotations side by side, stacked up. I mean, you got Sale on one side, Severino on the other as your aces, and then you're getting down to I guess Price in theory should be your number 2. Going up against a CC Sabathia, whose Sabathia was excellent again versus the Red Sox, which has kind of been a trend for him of late.
Right.
So it's just it's a bad spot to be in when you're looking at that potential number 2 matchup of number 2s, and you got Sabathia, who has been excellent against the Red Sox, and you got Price on the flip side, who's been god awful against the Yankees. It's not a good place to be in, and I don't even say that. It makes it. I mean, I think it's so much more important for the Red Sox, I think, to win the division versus the Yankees winning the division.
I agree. Although, I think at the end of the day, I do like the Red Sox rotation more. And I think the fact that the Yankees also have a guy in Sonny Gray who hasn't performed well since coming over and hasn't proven anything in big games kind of washes out that you have a guy like that on your own roster. And then, I think CC Sabathia is a bit more reliable than the other guys you have in your rotation, but I take Porcello over Tanaka. When they're both healthy, they're kind of a wash because you don't know what you're going to get sometimes. And I'll take Stephen Wright over. I mean, Brandon McCarthy's out for the season, so I'm not even sure who the Yankees are throwing out in the 5 spot right now.
No.
But I think overall the Red Sox rotation is better. But that said, I would trust CC Sabathia as the number 2 in a playoff game more than any of the Red Sox number 2 starters.
I'm just eager to see, even before you get to a playoff series, when you get to September and if that is I figured it'd be they're going to have a meaningful series in the Bronx in September. And whether, they factor in Price's struggles against the Yankees into figuring out, who's going to be, who's taking the ball in that series.
Right.
I mean, because this is a real thing. This isn't just one hiccup here and there.
No, it's a thing.
This is problematic.
It's a thing. And he can say it's just another start, and I thought I made good pitches, and they just put good swings on it. But it happens every single time you pitch against them.
Right.
So it's not just a random thing that happens. It's a legitimate thing that's continuing to happen. So
it's essentially the same thing as the playoff issues that have been well documented.
Yeah, and for me, the scary thing here is, and this is kind of ties into my bad thing and why it's, they need to win these series against the Yankees is you could legitimately find yourself playing in New York for the American League Division Series, because if you win the wild card game, you face the number 1 seed, and right now Houston, New York, and Boston are kind of jockeying for the number 1 spot. There's a very real chance the Yankees get it, and if they get that, you're in the wild. If they get that, then obviously they win the division. You're in the wild card game. If you win that game, you're in New York, which means someone's got to go in game 2 in New York.
In all likelihood, you have Chris Sale pitching that wild card game, so you're not having him for game 1 of the ALDS.
Right.
In which case, and it's like you said, it's in New York, so I do have so little trust in Bryce's ability to go in there and pitch well that you would throw out games 1 and 2. Rick Porcello and whoever else, whether it's Eduardo Rodriguez, Steve, whatever happens.
I don't want any of those guys pitching.
Whatever happens between now and then. But my point is that you save Price until you're back in Boston. So it would be game 3. You would assume would be Sale would be ready to go by then. So your Price isn't pitch until game 4. Like it's a weird dynamic, and it's just I'm just anxious to see how, whether they do factor in these struggles against the Yankees into their decision making, or if it's just a matter of, listen, he has been terrible against this team in the past. We know the playoff woes as it is, but we're gonna roll with this guy for better or worse.
I mean, there's no way around it. They have to go to him in New York if you're in that series, no matter if it's in New York or Boston. He's got to get the ball probably in game 2. I mean, you pay the guy $30 million, and at the end of the day, he has better stuff and he is a better pitcher than Rick Porcello and Eduardo Rodriguez. I mean, yes, Rick Porcello's had a slightly better season, but we've seen him in the playoffs too. He doesn't have stuff that plays well in the postseason at all. And Eduardo Rodriguez doesn't have the type of endurance in a game that plays well in the postseason. So ultimately, Price probably is your best option, which is scary because he's been a terrible playoff pitcher.
Right.
But I mean, the only thing that gives me a little bit of hope here is maybe it just compiles so much on him that we get into that situation in New York, and he finally finds a way to shut everybody up. We've seen it before with guys like John Lackey and Derek Lowe, where we've hated on him so much, and then they go out there and they pitch great. Granted, John Lackey, before he came to Boston, had won a Game 7 of a World Series, and Derek Lowe had pitched in some playoff games too. But maybe this all comes to a head, and he finally goes out and throws the gem in the playoffs and shuts everybody up. But you can't have confidence in that happening.
This was such a perfect opportunity for him to kind of flip the narrative a little bit.
Right.
I mean,
a narrative that he's built on his own with the sarcastic comments to the media.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, leading up to it, if he goes out in that game on Sunday night and pitches a gem, then it's almost like you look back on those comments to the media as if like, all right, this guy's pitching with a little bit of an edge to him now. It's just, you can spin it so many different ways. And now you look at it, it's like, well, clearly his head wasn't there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it was just, I found the Fortnite jokes last week to be weird. Anyways,
it's all weird.
It's just there's a lot of strangeness to it. But
I get, on one hand, I'm on his side with that stuff because I think the fact that he plays video games is so overblown. I mean,
I agree with that sentiment.
So many professional athletes do. A lot of players in the Red Sox do. Chris Sale does. So it's just that is such an easy thing for people in the media and just fans in general to throw out. I think I'm with him on being annoyed by the Fortnite narrative.
I agree with that. I also have no problem with him being like a wise ass every now and then.
Right, but has he earned the right to be a wise ass is the question. Like have you pitched well enough to earn the right to be a wise ass?
And it's just a very odd time. Like there was no context to it. It was just like, it was almost like he went into that interview and was like,
well,
I want to.
The reporter did bring up Fortnite, but Price kind of walked into it. But the thing is, to me, it's like you have, since you came here, you've been at best above average. At best, you were, bad by your standards in your first year in Boston, but overall, I guess you could say it was a good season. Last year, obviously, wasn't good at all.
I didn't think it was all that bad.
Right, no, but he had a lot of games where he gave up a lot of runs, and then he blew it in the playoffs. So ultimately, I think we can say that it wasn't great by any means. And then last year wasn't good at all until he had a couple good outings out of the pen in the playoffs. And then this year he's been good up until now, but again, he didn't pitch in one game against New York, and he got his lunch handed to him in the 2 other games against them. And then he obviously one of them being the infamous tingling sensation game. So it just to me, it's like you haven't earned the right to be a wise ass with people.
Yeah.
If you're pitching like Chris Sale and the media's on you about Fortnite and you want to be a wise ass, I'm all for it. But to me, you got to perform a little bit before you can start being like that. That's just me.
And now, I mean, even moving forward without the Yankees context, big star coming up in his next time to the rotation. I mean, how does he bounce back from this?
Well, it's against the Royals.
So
I mean, they're crap.
I mean,
they're
a perfect opportunity for him to get back on track, but
right, yeah, but it'll mean nothing. That's the position he's put himself in.
True.
That you've completely failed to show up in virtually every big game you've played for this team, and so now you go out and shut out the Royals, and no one is going to care. And maybe they should. That's not to say that you shouldn't, but it's just the position he's put himself in, where he can go out and pitch a gem against the Royals and then have another great game against the Orioles after that, and it won't matter because at this point it's not going to matter until he goes out in September in that series in Boston and has a good game or in the playoffs.
David Price, only 1 quality start, 9 starts against the Yankees.
It's not good, especially when the standards for a quality start are rather low.
Right.
Quality starts are made for pitchers like Rick Porcello.
It's a classic Rick Porcello.
He is the quintessential quality start pitcher.
I agree.
Right. You start calling him Rick Quality Start Porcello.
What do you got for a bad thing? Anything else that you?
No, that was really it for me. Is just
concerning him about this series.
Well, it's just for me. It's not so much concerning because I mean we know what we have of these guys. We know Price doesn't show up in big games. We know Erod. I know he's had success against the Yankees, but this is a big game, and he showed that maybe he's not ready for big games like this. Chris Sale was Chris Sale. The offense beat around Sonny Gray. Those are all things we kind of already knew about this team. Problem is that they just didn't win the games. Ultimately, it comes down to wins and losses, and they didn't win, and you just can't afford that, especially with the Yankees having 4 games in hand. You can't afford to lose these games because you can't get in that wild card. You can't be on the road in the ALDS in New York or Houston for that matter.
Yeah, a lot of just things were reinforced, like you said, that we already kind of had an idea or knew about, and we just saw it, crop up over the weekend. What about the offenses? I mean, obviously the Yankees were just as advertised, hitting the ball out of the ballpark left and right. I don't know. See,
they were weird games because when you get down that much, the offense has so much pressure on it to do anything that it's impossible to really judge them. Like I can't look at the first game and the third game and say, oh, the Red Sox can't hit in New York, or they can't hit Severino, they can't hit Sabathia, because they're just such weird games. It's hard for me to judge the offense in that respect. In the same way where it's hard for me to judge them with what they did against Sonny Gray, because Sonny Gray is not good anymore, or at least he hasn't been since coming to New York.
He's been incredibly overrated.
Right. I mean, I think
even before he really, took a downturn. I
mean, he was good in Oakland, but again, that's a place where you didn't pitch in one game that mattered. Now you're in a place that matters and you can't do it. And so I think if anything, if there's any takeaway, it's that the power throughout the Yankees lineup is legitimate. They have more power than you, and I think but for that reason they have a lineup that plays better in the postseason than you, because the Red Sox, outside of Martinez and Betts to a certain extent, are a team that relies on stringing together hits. And you can do that in the playoffs. You can. I mean, the Royals did it. But, we've seen more recently that hitting the ball out of the ballpark will really get you to where you want to be. And the Yankees just can do that better than you.
Yeah. My thing with the Yankees offense has long been that, I could totally see a scenario, as good as they are, where, you look at the end of a series and Aaron Judge has, got 2 hits and a crap load of strikeouts, and same goes for Stan.
But maybe 2 of those hits are 3-run home runs.
Well, the thing is, their ceiling is as high as almost any offense we've ever seen. I mean, it's from a power standpoint, certainly, but I also think there's a little bit of a floor there too. I mean, especially when you consider how young a lot of these guys are. I could see a scenario where the offense just goes, blank for an entire series, so I guess that's what I wanted to see from the Red Sox this weekend, was to just have a good series on the mound. I think the one thing you can point to as a definitive advantage for the Red Sox when you stack those 2 teams up is the rotation. So I just wanted to see the Red Sox go in there and outpitch them from a starting pitching perspective. Clearly didn't happen.
No. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I think, you can say the Yankees, they have a low floor, but they also have Brett Gardner hitting in the 9th spot. And Brett Gardner isn't the player he used to be, but he's still hitting over 250 with 7 home runs and can steal bases. I mean, your 8-9 hitters are hitting under 200. So, I mean, just the fact that they have a guy like that down there. I mean, the only real hole in their lineup has been at first base with Greg Bird, who also wears number 33, like Larry Bird. And he hasn't been any good. And then what was Brandon Drury yesterday was in there. And so, I mean, but outside of that, I mean, they just have so much more power throughout the lineup. Like you said, they have a low floor because they could, rack up a bunch of strikeouts. But you're not going to beat the Yankees, I don't think, in a playoff series or just any regular season series by outslugging them. You really need to keep the runs low and win those kind of games.
So they have that series against the Royals that you had mentioned coming up. But before that, they travel to Washington, play the National Series. This is a nice little
fun series.
Like this is a kind of fun interleague series. Nationals really underwhelming this year. I mean, I think people kind of looked at them as the cream of the crop in the National League, and they've been all over the place really with their production. I mean, they started off slow, then they went on a tear, and now they're back to struggling again. It's just been all over the place. But I mean, there's some talent. There's some serious talent on that roster, and I just think it's going to be an interesting. I mean, I still think when you talk about what teams are going to be there in the end of the National League, I fully expect them to be there at least fighting for a playoff spot until the very end. So
yeah, absolutely.
It starts off with Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer versus Rick Porcello. A hell of a pitching matchup. I love it. I love Scherzer. He's like one of my favorite players to watch.
I agree. I do like Max Scherzer. My big prediction for the series.
Yes.
Brian Johnson's going to hit a home run.
Okay. I mean, it's the book on him. BJ can swing the bat.
BJ can swing the stick. But no, it's an interesting series, no doubt. The Red Sox don't really have their best pitchers lined up. But it's in Washington. You get to see Bryce Harper. You get to face Max Scherzer. It's a good test for this team. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good series. It's kind of hard to turn the page on it and think about it right now, just because of what we just watched against the Yankees. But I agree that tonight should be good. I know Max Scherzer has the ability to shut the Red Sox down. But Rick Porcello is also equally capable of going out, and I think it's a sneaky big game for him because that was a tough loss last night, and you kind of want to turn the page, get your team back in the win column. So, looking for a good outing from Rick Porcello tonight.
Obviously, a lot of some connections between those two former teammates.
Yep.
Porcello going to being traded to the Red Sox before the 2015 season. Scherzer signing that huge contract with the Nationals before the 2015 season. So just kind of inherently linked a little bit. Where do you put Scherzer in terms of, is he the best pitcher in baseball?
I mean, that's tough. All things being equal, I still would say it's Clayton Kershaw. But I mean, he's right there behind him.
I just want to, when we have our going down a rabbit hole on Baseball Reference like we tend to do on a daily basis when we're just screwing around in the office, working very diligently, of course, doing extensive research. I'm just like in awe at his numbers.
Yeah, I mean, his strikeout totals are crazy, and again, we talk about stuff that plays in the postseason. I mean, this guy has pitched well in the playoffs for the most part, and he's got the stuff to play in the postseason too. I mean, he can make guys swing and miss, and I don't know where. I definitely say he's top 5.
Yeah,
without a doubt. I do think Chris Sale's better. I think when he's healthy, I think Clayton Kershaw's better. But after that, I mean, who else could you really put above Max Scherzer? Not Garrett Cole, not Justin Verlander. Severino's making a case this year, but I guess we have to see him do it in the playoffs because he struggled last year.
Scherzer's always been kind of interesting too, because even when he was that year, he landed the huge contract, which is a pretty fascinating contract too. There's a lot of deferred money. I think he's paid until 2028 or something.
Bobby Bonilla Day yesterday.
Yeah,
you saw that.
So I don't. At the time, there weren't a lot of rumblings about the Red Sox making a strong push to sign him. And I think that maybe his age kind of factored in that. The focus, obviously, at that time was on getting John Lester back in a Red Sox uniform.
Right.
But it's also the same offseason in which they go out and spent all the money on Hanley Ramirez and Pablo Sandoval. So I can't help but, like, look at this still and be like, Scherzer's kind of one that got away. Like,
well, and the thing is, with
the benefit of hindsight, obviously, it's like, wow, they could have upped the ante and spent the money on a guy like that rather than, a year later signing Bryce to a contract that exceeds the one that Scherzer got. But it is like kind of when you look back, it's like maybe they should have kicked the tires on that a little bit more.
I mean, think about that offseason. Instead of you didn't get John Lester or Max Scherzer. Instead, you got Pablo Sandoval and Hanley Ramirez, who both aren't here anymore. Meanwhile, Max Scherzer's tearing it up in Washington. John Lester's proven to still be one of the elite pitchers in the game out in Chicago, and you have David Price, who can't pitch in Yankee Stadium. Just a colossal swing and miss in that offseason.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it was a tough offseason.
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, I think the more we look at it, I mean, we're not going to go down this hole because everyone knows, but obviously they made a mistake in not bringing back John Lester. I mean, they got all scared off by the age. To me, I always looked at him and I said, this is a guy. What concerns me with pitchers over 30 and why I didn't like the Price signing at the time was because you look at them and think, what are you when your fastball goes away? When you get a little bit older and you lose, that extra oomph on your fastball, what are you? And to me, John Lester was never a guy that needed an overpowering fastball. He proved he could be effective and be an elite pitcher in the playoffs by location and with the secondary stuff and painting that cutter on the outside of the plate. And whereas I looked at Price and I've always wondered, what is your dominating pitch outside of your fastball? What's your out pitch? And when you lose your fastball, what are you? And you see guys look awfully, rarely do you see anybody look uncomfortable at the plate against Bryce. And so I just, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but back and you're like, they just should have signed Lester because it's a guy that proved he could do it here.
Yeah, the known quantity. I always love opt for the known quantity over.
You could have had him for almost $100 million less too.
So, yeah, like you said, that's I don't even
tough one to swallow.
It is. I mean, you look at now he's hitting home runs.
Yeah, he's hitting a three-run home run yesterday.
With just he might start the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think he's 11-2 with like a 2-point something ERA.
Yeah, he's been awesome this year. But let me ask you this: this is a hypothetical one for you. And I wish we got to see this pitching matchup, but who would you take right now, Max Scherzer or Chris Sale?
I would take Chris Sale because
factoring in it's a tough question because the age is obviously a factor. Scherzer being 34, Sale's 39. Well, Scherzer's turning 34, I think, and Sale's 29. The contract. I mean, Chris Sale still is the biggest bargain in baseball, really, but you're going to have to pay him here. You know what I mean? We're getting to that point where the free agency is looming.
Right. For 1 year,
Scherzer, meanwhile, has the huge contract already.
It's tough. If I'm just talking about the Red Sox for one season, I know I just said Sale's the better pitcher, and I do believe that overall. But if I'm just looking at one season for the Red Sox, I guess I would take Scherzer because, I mean, the big bats standing in your way are Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Jose Altuve, George Springer, guys like that, all from the right side of the plate. And Scherzer has that wipeout slider against righties. And not to say Chris Sale can't get righties out, because obviously he can. But, that was Scherzer, coupled with the fact that we've seen him do it in the playoffs where we really haven't seen it with Chris Sale yet. I would take Scherzer. But overall, I think Chris Sale is the better pitcher. And like you said, he's younger. We'll see how his body holds up. Obviously a really thin guy. We'll see how the body holds up over the course of his career. But it's tough. But right now, I would just take Max Scherzer. For one season.
It really is pretty amazing that Chris Sale, I mean, knock on wood, has never had some sort of serious issue when you figure out how much goes into his delivery and everything.
Yeah.
It is just, it's fascinating.
Knock on wood.
I did.
Knock on our felt desk in here. What about you? Who would you take?
I tend to agree with if it's the one season, like right now, if it was opening day and you said, who do you want this season? I agree with you. I'd probably take Scherzer. But for the long haul, it's a pretty sizable age difference. So I think that the window is obviously bigger for Sale to have more prolonged success. So
right.
Yeah, long term, I think I'd take Sale.
They're both so great though, because like I don't know. I like guys that really have a lot of attitude on the mound.
Well, they both very similar in that regard.
Yeah, and I like guys that get the ball and throw the thing.
Yep.
So I don't have to sit there and watch you fumble around between pitches, and both do that. But and I look, Max Scherzer would be great in Boston. I think without a doubt.
He's an absolute psychopath on the mound.
Yeah, which I love. Psycho.
Highly entertaining.
Yeah.
Another highly entertaining guy. Not the greatest season so far for him. He's been fine, I guess. Average is low though. Bryce Harper, maybe the most polarizing player in baseball.
Right.
As far as what he is, and I think we've had this conversation before, but it's just when you look at Bryce Harper, is he underrated, overrated, perfectly rated? Like it's so hard to tell with him because it depends on who you talk to.
Right. I believe Bryce Harper is overrated. I've always thought that. I mean, the power's
because you have the contingent that thinks he's like the second best player in baseball behind Mike Trout, $400 a man, and then you'll. I
don't think anybody and people that know what they're talking about. I don't think those people really believe that anymore. They can't. How could you? There's no way you could think that. I mean,
he's still getting. What do you think he's going to make coming up in free agency? 300
if
million?
He keeps struggling this season, and just real quick, so for people at home, so they know, right now, as of Monday afternoon, Bryce Harper is hitting .216 with 20 home runs and 49 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 13 doubles, no triples. Let's see he's .360 on base and an .841 OPS. A lot of walks, 67 walks. A lot of guys aren't pitching to him.
That's the thing. Nobody's pitching to him this year.
Right, and so that definitely plays into it.
Of walks.
But you put that up against, if we're looking at his career average through his career, 170, 217, 246, 274, 293, 310, I believe was the year he won the MVP, and then 236 and 216. And in his career, he's only hit more than 30 home runs twice, I believe. I know I'm kind of losing track now. But I don't know. I know he's a good player. And I just realized actually that I got those average stats wrong because I was looking at the whole Nats roster. But they're not that different. I mean, Bryce Harper typically has been a 250 or below hitter with a couple years where he hit around 300. But I think normally he's between like 25 and 30 home runs with a couple big years. But to me, that's not indicative of the second best player in baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say for me he's like a top 10, maybe top 15.
Yeah.
Like in reality, if you're just looking at the kind of player is, I mean, yeah, maybe top 15, but I could come up with 10 guys that are better than him easily.
Yeah, no, I think he's still going to get the name recognition. But it's weird because I thought for a while, like the first like 2 or 3 years of his career, he kind of got some flack for being overrated because the hype was. I mean, we've never seen hype like that on a prospect.
Yeah,
it was insane. Like he was supposed to be, immediately the face of baseball. And so when he didn't perform up to that level, he was still good, still solid. But when he didn't perform up to that level, he received some criticism, and which I thought some of it was unwarranted because I'm like, this guy is still a really good player.
Right.
Like he's just not that transcendent player yet that everybody kind of expected right out of the gate. So in that regard, I kind of gave him a pass and said, maybe this guy's underrated now because we've gone so far in the other direction. But then it came back. He had that MVP season. And it was like, all right, let's go. Let's go. let's go. This is the Bryce Harper you bargained for here.
And he had a good season last year, 319 with 29 home runs. That absolutely is a good season. But again, he's around a 270 career hitter, and he's only hit more than 30 homers in a season once. His MVP year where he got 42. So the book on Harper is he's one of the game's elite power hitters, but that's just not true.
He's missed games too. I mean, he
has missed games.
Durability.
He's also got punched in the face by Jonathan Papelbon.
True.
But that said, because of the star power and the age, he's still only 25 years old. You got to think that he's got one or at least a few more big prime seasons left where he's really going to explode. I still think he gets over 250 million easily.
Oh, 100%.
I don't know. People are talking like 300 or some. I saw some last year saying Bryce Harper could get 400 million. I don't know about that, especially with what we saw with free agency this past offseason. But I think somewhere between 250 and 300 is what he'll go for.
So we had this conversation last week about, and it's a debate that probably kicked around over the next few days. You see it every now and then. We talked about how Mookie Betts compares to Mike Trout with the Angels being in town. Now, when you look at, I think this is another worthwhile exercise. Mookie, he's going to get paid at some point as well. When you look at, who you would rather have over the long haul, you taking Mookie Betts or you taking Bryce Harper when it comes to these two?
That's a tough question. This might be blasphemy, but overall, I guess I would take, for the long haul, I would take Bryce Harper. Just because I think Mookie Betts right now is undoubtedly a better player. And over the next, say, 5 seasons, I think he'll be a better player. But I've told you this before, that I worry with a guy, as small as Betts is, who relies so much on his, otherworldly quickness and the way, how quickly he swings the bat, where if he gets, starts getting these smaller injuries that start to pile up, those start to add up a lot on smaller guys. And I know he's a great athlete and everything, but I just worry about at some point down the line here, even in his early 30s, that Betts just has a kind of a steep decline because of injuries. And I know that's just complete guessing because we haven't really seen him get hurt yet. But Harper has the profile of a guy who that really wouldn't happen to. He's kind of he's a stronger, bigger body. He's 6'3", plays in the outfield. I know Betts is too, but he doesn't fly around like Mookie Betts does. So I just think he's kind of a safer bet. But that said, if they were both free agents this offseason and you could tell me you could get one of them on a 5-year deal, I think both of them could get 10. But if you were going to get him on a 5-year deal, I would take Betts. But overall, like your franchise player for the foreseeable future, I would take Bryce Harper.
It's an interesting one. I'm taking Mookie, I think.
You're taking Mookie? That's fine. He's a better player.
That's the thing. I just think he impacts the game in more ways than Harper. Harper is like you look at him and you look at it to go back to the mentioning the way these two guys are built. Harper just it feels like the quintessential middle of the order bat, that you just build your lineup around. Like you kind of have that feeling about Bryce Harper.
Mookie, he's hitting like Adam Dunn. He's got Adam Dunn numbers. He's 216 with 20 homers and 84 strikeouts.
See, my thing with him is
Adam Dunn numbers.
You mentioned the walks. He gets more pitches thrown him out of the strike zone than any hitter in baseball.
Sure.
Maybe you get to a point where it's almost like a frustration and you just start chasing some of those pitches rather than sticking with just, he obviously draws an insane amount of walks, but it must be frustrating if you're constantly up there and not getting a pitch to hit.
Well, that said, his on-base percentage still is only .366, which is good, but it's not great. So you can walk all you want, but
with Mookie, we're seeing too. I think he's even kind of tapping into some potential that we didn't even really know was there. Just this whole working with JD Martinez has gotten more credit than any player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
About just working with these guys and working on the ability to use all fields, and we've seen Mookie show more power to the opposite field than he has in any season to this point. So I don't know. I look at Mookie and just the overall the ability to on the bases in the field. I think he's a top 3 defensive outfielder.
Right. I will say,
I think he's the second best player in baseball behind Mike Trout. So I
agree. And what I also say is, I think earlier this year I was saying that I think the one thing that prevents Betts from being, a true lineup altering guy like, say, I don't know, Stanton or Judge or whatever is, his inability to hit the ball for power to the opposite way. But yes, Mookie Betts is great, and he hits a lot of home runs, and he's awesome. I'm not saying he's not. But, in the playoffs, you can pitch to him a little bit in the sense where, before anyway, you weren't really worried about him hitting the ball out to the opposite field. So you throw him outside pitches and, if he gets a single, so be it. But if he can start hitting the ball, with power to the opposite field with regularity, like he's been, he's got 2 this year, and he's been driving the ball out there a lot. If that keeps up, then, you really can't pitch the guy. Because we know we can turn on an inside fastball better than just about anybody. Again, I don't want to make it sound like Mookie Betts has holes or he can be pitched to.
No, I obviously we're talking about 2 phenomenal baseball
players.
We're
also just trying to find holes in, in 2 of the best baseball players on the planet.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of a fruitless endeavor. But I think it's an interesting debate, especially after having the one last week about just kind of where Mookie ranks in comparison to Trout, who
He also,
by all accounts, is
anybody who watched that
That's
series
playing
with
the
the Angels and thought, wow, that Mike Trout really isn't, isn't as advertised because he didn't have any extra base hits. I think it's pretty clear the guy's hurt.
Yeah,
finger injuries are no joke for baseball players. Look what it did to Bogarts last year.
Seeing him be such a non-factor too, kind of gets to the core of it. I mean, we're kind of going off the rails a little bit here, but we had that conversation about like how to market these guys and how do you turn players into these huge, larger-than-life personalities and superstars, and how baseball's kind of facing a problem. And I think a lot of that is just due to inherently you're going to get a series like that.
Right.
Whereas if you go to like an NBA game, it's very rare that LeBron James is going to go 3 games in a row without leaving his fingerprints all over the game.
It's a good point.
Like you're going to know him. You're going to know his presence is being felt. Whereas even somebody as good as Mike Trout might go 3 games with just minimal impact, and you don't really hear much from him, and it's just. And then you come away with the feeling that, I mean, if you're just a casual fan, you might come away with the feeling like, oh, I mean, what's so good about this guy? He's not all he's cracked up to be.
That's true. It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, whenever LeBron James comes and plays the Celtics, it's very, very obvious how good he is.
Right.
Whereas you say in baseball, you can have a few bad days. And
Tom Brady's not going to go 3 subpar games in a row. Like you're gonna know,
right.
You're gonna know that we're watching one of the best players on the planet.
Right.
Whereas
Trout
could have a bad series, and if you don't follow him all the time, and this is your only exposure to him, it's like, that guy sucks. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, it's like true. What if you're like somebody in Minnesota and you go for a Twins-Yankees game and you're like, I want to see this Giancarlo Stanton. I've heard so much about this dude. He's huge.
Yeah.
He hits blonks.
He strikes out 20 times.
And he goes like 4 for like 15 in the series and with like 10 strikeouts, and you're like, what was that?
Maybe this guy isn't that great.
Yeah.
So.
He makes $300 million. What?
Yeah.
And it just sounds weird.
So I don't know. I mean, that was one thing that kind of was one of my takeaways from that series. But
yeah,
aside from our boy that pitched the series opener with his
I keep wanting to say John Moore because that's who the Bruins signed yesterday. What was the guy's name?
I don't even remember.
He looks. Someone called him a hobo Thor, which I thought was crazy. He does look like a hobo Thor. There's something more.
Angels pitcher with long hair. I just Google it real quick.
Jared Weaver.
John Lamb.
John
Lamb. Even better than John Moore. Anyways.
John Lamb. That might be the last time you ever see John Lamb on a big league mound. The guy had nothing.
That wouldn't be the worst thing.
Neither did Andrew Heaney.
All right. So we'll go buy our John Lamb jerseys.
It'd be a great bobblehead.
It would be a good bobblehead. They have like a Chia Pet, John Lamb.
I was going to say, have like Chia Pet hair so it actually flaps around.
It'd be like one of those troll dolls.
Yeah. But
they have just the flowing locks. John Lamb.
With that same empty, dumb expression on his face when he walked off the mound.
Yeah, did not instill a lot of confidence.
No.
But, all right, you got anything else you want to get into before we get out of here?
No. I think we just about covered it. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Independence Day. Independence Day is going to be on TV all week. That's a great movie, though.
I guess it's all right.
You don't like Independence Day? It's so
I guess
awesome. It's just so terribly awesome.
It's just one of those movies I've seen way too many times because it's always on TNT or whatever, and I just...
Yeah. Movies, guys who like movies. Or
yeah, I mean, it's
like an AMC classic.
It's all right. The sequel.
A Few Good Men followed by Independence Day.
Yeah, right now it's like the Dark Knight trilogy. The Batman movies have been on a ton. Yeah. And not to go down another rabbit hole, but they had them back to back this weekend. The 3 Dark Knight movies, the good ones, and then immediately after they started these new crappy ones with Ben Affleck as the Batman, and it just seeing them side by side, you're like, oh god, the new ones are so terrible.
Wow.
So.
All right. Well, happy 4th. Happy Independence Day. Enjoy your fireworks.
Be careful with your fireworks. Don't blow your fingers off.
Yeah, do not do that. Enjoy some libations and whatever else you want to celebrate your patriotism. So we're gonna get out of here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you'd like to follow myself on NESN, on Twitter, on NESN. You can do that you can do it on NESN too. At the Ricky Doyle, where you at Dak Randall.
Yes.
Cool. But more importantly, follow at NESN. And we'll be back next week, God willing.
All right. See ya.
See ya, everyone.